May 12th, 2018, here at the Lincoln Woods Trailhead, Lincoln, New Hampshire. We're about to hike Owl's Head Mountain. Alright, so here on our hike to Owl's Head, starting off at the Lincoln Woods Trailhead. We're going to make our way up the Lincoln Woods Trail, up to Black Pond Trail. 2.5 miles in, we're going to go just under a mile up to Black Pond. We're going to bushwhack another mile up through the forest up here to the Lincoln Brook Trail, and then we're going to make our way a couple miles up to the Brutus Bushwhack. It's 3/4 of a mile or so in to hit the Owl's Head Trail, and then another 3/4 of a mile or so up to Owl's Head. So about 8.5 miles or so in, out and back. So we're looking at somewhere upwards of 17 miles on the day. You can see the remains of the old railroad bed which used to run through the duration of what is now the Lincoln Woods Trail for miles. This area was heavily logged for years, late 1800s and into the early 1900s, until this was finally abandoned and the forest has had a chance to regrow. Makes for an easy walking trail. An interesting bit of history to look back on for this area. Alright, we're approaching the Black Pond Trail. You can see on the left, 2.5 miles in, leaving the easy walking of the Lincoln Woods Trail and the old railroad bed behind us. We're pushing on 0.8 miles to Black Pond, and then we'll start the bushwhack on the Black Pond Bushwhack another mile further before we link up with our next trail. All right, here we are, 3 miles in, Black Pond. We're about to embark on the bushwhack. It's going to be another mile before we meet up with the next trail. We're about a 1/4 mile in on our 1 mile bushwhack. You can see this is about as good as it gets in terms of any sort of a worn path. This is not a maintained trail by any means. There's a lot of leaf cover from the fall. There apparently hasn't been too much foot traffic out here over the winter and in the spring so far. So I've been wandering on and off path, kind of regaining it and losing it temporarily, but pointed in the right direction and making progress. All right, we're making our way out of the Black Pond Bushwhack. Successfully navigated. That was hairy at some points. There were at least a dozen times I'd kind of wandered off path there, but luckily was able to re-find the trail or any remnants of prior foot traffic. So here we are, junction with the Lincoln Brook Trail. We got 2.1 miles to make our way up to the base of Owl's Head into the Brutus Bushwhack, and then we'll start making our ascent. Well, we're about 6¼ miles in. This is our first sign of snow. We've only ascended about 1,200 feet. We're at an elevation of 1,900 feet right now. So expect we'll see more snow as we continue to make our way up in elevation. But trails have been remarkably dry so far, with the exception of a few pooling areas from some snowmelt runoff, but otherwise we're making pretty good progress without too many slowdowns. Alright, this is our first major crossing of the day here. Not long to go before we get to the Brutus Bushwhack and start making our way up to the top. Check it on the other side. Okay, so that was pretty hairy. I navigated around for a good 15 minutes up and downstream, trying to find a solid place to cross. Water level's just so high, there's really no good place. I had to get wet. You know, left foot is completely soaked at this point. Luckily I had my trekking poles. They really helped with maintaining balance in this tricky crossing. Got wet, but you know, at 7 miles in, we're not turning back. So we made it across. We'll have to deal with this on the way back, but for now we're pushing on. It's like another crossing. Well, we made it across the second crossing. These are definitely two of the most sketchiest water crossings I've ever done. Getting on all fours, basically, using anything possible to stay out of the water. It's so high, it's nearly impossible. You got to get wet if you want to make it up this trail at this point, not turn back. First trail marker we've seen in a while. This is marking the start of the Owl's Head Trail. Tempted to take the Brutus Bushwhack, but just couldn't find it. We're having a lot of trouble. Not a lot of markers on the trails here. Obviously it's maintained to a lower standard, being a wilderness zone. So decided to play it safe and push on and look for the more official trail. So here we go, making our ascent. We're 8½ miles in, 3 hours and 40 minutes so far in the day. A little extra mileage under us due to some extra excursions trying to find trail crossings at the two brooks, and then backtracking trying to find the Brutus Bushwhack. So we did a little bit extra exercise on the day, but these are the first steep sections we're seeing. Really got 1,000 feet of elevation gain to go. Like I said, 8½ miles in. Taking a quick pause here on the trail up Owl's Head. Just a beautiful view right now of the Franconia Range. You got on the left Mount Flume, Mount Liberty, working our way up the ridge, Little Haystack, Mount Lincoln, Mount Lafayette, and peeking out in the distance, Mount Garfield. It's a great perspective on some awesome peaks. You can see there's a monorail here going down the middle of the trail in some sections. Some spots it's as deep as about 2 feet. In other areas it's a foot or less, depending on the amount of shade or sun exposure it's getting. For the most part, I'm still able to stay on top of it, not really sinking through despite the warm temps. So that's helpful. Making slow progress up there. All right, we're above 3,500 feet of elevation at this point. Soft snow from 20 minutes ago is now turning pretty icy, so starting to slip on the trails. Decided to put on the micro spikes at this point. It looks like the snow is here to stay from here on up, so we'll put these on, make quicker work up to the top, and then stop for a snack. Well, here we are at the summit of Owl's Head, 5 hours in, 9.8 miles. We trekked to get up here. It's quite a trek. You know, there aren't many mountains up here where you can't just drive to the base basically and park and start hiking up the mountain. This one you have to hike in at least 8 miles before you hit the base of it, and then start, you know, what is a pretty steep yet short, you know, 1.5 miles or so ascent. So it's definitely a unique hike. You know, it is wooded as you see here, so it doesn't offer much in the way of views directly from the summit. We had some really nice views of the Franconia range, you know, on the way up the slide, and I can see through the trees over here. You probably can't see very well, but we can see the Bonds over there, West Bond, Mount Bond, Bond Cliff. So nice view of a portion of the Twin Range over there. Feet are definitely wet from the river crossings a few miles back, developing some blisters because of that. You know, the beauty of Gore-Tex, it'll keep water out, but it keeps it in too. So that's going to be fun in a few miles on the way back. Going to stop here, have a good bite to eat for lunch, replenish some water, and start making my way back. I swapped off my long sleeve base layer, put on the t-shirt. You know, it was getting pretty hot. Actually, the sun, it feels really hot in the sun today. It was supposed to only be around 50 degrees, and obviously cooler up here at elevation, and possibly, you know, cloudy and rainy, but it looks like blue skies. So weather forecast was wrong, which is good for me. But definitely it's a hot day. So I'm going to take a quick break and then start making our way back down. Well, we've hiked down through the snow zone, just past the last of the ice. Now we're into open running water down the trail for this segment. So once we get past this, we'll hit the rock slide, which is pretty slippery with the falling rocks. But after that, the hard part will certainly be behind us. We just emerged from the trees to the exposed rock slide section of the trail. This is a welcome sight. Back to these magnificent views of the Franconia range that we saw earlier. Okay, we just made our way down the Owl's Head path, re-merging with the Brook Trail, a couple miles to bring us back down to where we need to link up with the Black Pond Bushwhack. In any case, we get the steepest part behind us. We came down the rock slide, definitely a very steep section of trail, one of the steepest I've ascended or descended. A lot of loose rock, which is tricky for footing, so I'm glad to have that behind us. And we have pretty manageable grades from here on out. We just have those tricky water crossings to encounter again. So once we're past that, the dangerous part should be behind us. All right, here we are back in my old nemesis. First crossing out of two tricky ones we have to navigate. Halfway across, so far so good. Alright, we just successfully navigated our second water crossing and final one for the day. Just about 12 miles hiked, 6 hours and 40 minutes in so far. Hard part's behind us, just have to navigate that Black Pond bushwhack and then we're home free. Alright, we just made it back to the start of the Black Pond bushwhack. We were able to spot that pretty easily. So at this point we're 7 hours and 15 or so minutes in, 13.5 miles or just over. And so we'll take the bushwhack back to Black Pond. That's 1 mile back there and then another 0.8 of a mile before we regroup and come out on the Lincoln Woods Trail. Alright, we survived the bushwhack. Miraculously, I only lost the trail a few times over the course of a mile, which is about 10 times less than I did on the way in. Clearly, it's an acquired skill, something you need to work on. All right, we just turned onto the Lincoln Woods Trail. We're 15.75 miles in, and just over 8 hours in the hike. So we've got 2.5 miles to go. It's all going to be nice, almost level ground here on the Lincoln Woods Trail. Very easy walking. So let's wrap this one up in the final leg. Alright, here we are back at the Lincoln Woods Visitor Center, just crossing the bridge. 18.3 miles on the day, 8 hours 52 minutes. Kept moving for the most part, didn't stop too long. Conditions of the trails weren't too bad. We had some slow going sections up there at elevation with the decaying snowpack. This was a unique hike today. It wasn't quite as difficult as some other hikes in terms of pure climbing and elevation gain. But what it made up for in climbing, it actually was more difficult in terms of the overall length. 18 miles is a fair amount to trek. And also the mental factor, trying to stay on trail and keep an eye on the paths, which were not well maintained. In a couple places with the bushwhack and then the Owl's Head path heading up to the summit itself. So those sections were tricky, slow going, trying to maintain the path, not go off trail. GPS was very helpful today in helping me reorient myself in a few spots. But overall, definitely a unique hike, different than any that I've done so far.